Welcome to the Marketing AI SparkCast, where AI meets modern marketing. Hosted by Abby Varma, a global leader in marketing, AI, and innovation, each episode brings you real conversations with leaders putting AI to work in strategy and execution. This episode is brought to you by Spark Novus and the Marketing AI Pulse community. Here's your host, Abby Varma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Marketing AI Pulse Monthly Brief. This is the brief for May 2026. The Marketing AI Pulse is one of the fastest growing communities focused at the intersection of marketing and AI. If you're not a member, we would love for you to join. You can join at marketingaipulse.com. It is free to join. For our Atlanta-based community members, we have something really special for you. We are doing our inaugural Marketing AI Pulse Executive Forum on June 22nd at Atlanta Tech Park from 4 to 7 p.m. We will have Julie Lowry, who is the partner at McKinsey & Company, joining us for a fireside chat. We'll have an opportunity for all of you attending to ask her questions and engage with her, and then we have a cocktail reception afterwards. If you want to sign up, you can learn more and sign up at marketingaipulse.com. For Marketing AI Pulse members, there is a 20% off discount code. You can use MAP20 to avail of that. All right, so that with the announcements out of the way, let me welcome our co-host, my friend Matt Sear from Loop AI. Matt, how are you doing, man? Welcome back.
Thank you. Doing good. Yeah, had a good trip out to Denver last week. Spoke at the Build a Better Agency Summit and enjoyed the Mile High City. A lot of fun and talked with a lot of really interesting marketers, agency leaders, and I learned a lot. So it was a great trip.
Awesome. I know that no trip to Denver for you is complete without going to your favorite restaurant.
You know the way right to my heart, Abby. I managed, after more time than I would like to admit, to make my way to the famous Casa Bonita in Denver. When I was a kid, my father was in the Air Force and we were stationed at Colorado Springs. And we would go to Casa Bonita all those many years ago. And the memory stuck with me over the years. And so I was back in Denver for the first time since then and said, you know what, I've got to go back and see if it still holds up. And very happy to report that it is every bit as fun and weird as it ever was, and they have actually made the food good.
Nice.
Which you don't go there for the food, you go there for the cliff divers and the magic shows and all the other exciting nooks and crannies of the Casa Bonita experience. But the food was actually quite good this time as well. So it was a very successful trip. In addition to the trip to Casa Bonita, got to catch a Rockies game, went over to Coors Field, which was actually just a short walk from where the conference was being held, and had a great time catching a game there. Had never been to Coors before, and actually had weather going on there that delayed us for a little bit, but once we got going, it was a ton of fun.
Hey, I'm just happy that they removed the wanted poster from Matt Sear from your childhood at Casa Bonita. So I'm glad that came down.
Yeah. Well, I wore a disguise because I didn't know if they would let me in, but so I did wear a disguise and I was able to get in, and they were not able to track me down, and so I was able to have the full experience.
Awesome. So Matt, switching gears, one of the things that we're going to do differently in this episode, as you and me have been talking over the last couple of episodes, is that there's just a lot of news in the world of marketing and AI, and it's really hard to cram in everything. We've been trying to fit in a lot of stories, and I just feel that we don't quite do justice to some of those. And at the tail end of every episode, we're trying to rush through a lot of that stuff. And some of these topics genuinely deserve more than the 2 minutes of airtime that you and me give it. So this time we are focusing on fewer topics, but diving in deeper because they are just very meaningful to the CMOs and the marketing leaders that are listening in. And for the other topics that are also meaningful, we're going to add them and expose them in different ways, like the newsletter and social media within the Marketing AI Pulse ecosystem. So, Matt, with that, for this episode, I know you were kicking us off with some Gartner research.
Yeah.
Take it away and tell us all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, lots going on. And it seems like within the last month or so, there's been a lot of research that has been released by sort of big organizations, the Agency Management Institute, who put on the Build a Better Agency Summit. Every year, they actually released their annual survey. This one was specific to AI, and so very, very relevant to the conversations we were having last week. But about 2 weeks ago, Gartner had their Gartner Marketing Symposium in London and used that as an opportunity to release a survey report of their own. And they had done a survey of about 400 CMOs. And I think probably no surprise to you and me, they found that automation of marketing work is likely to double from about 16% to about 36% by 2028. They're already putting quite a lot of budget, in this case, about 15% of their budget going toward AI. It'd be interesting to see how they defined that going to AI specifically, but a not insignificant piece of budget going to that. And yet, to me, the most interesting thing is that only 30% of the folks who were surveyed said they're ready to scale AI. And this is not a surprise to me. I mean, I think, you and I both see this a lot, which is AI adoption is happening often in fits and starts in sort of disconnected ways. And I think what this report is signaling is the place that we're moving toward, I think, is AI systemization. And the place we're coming from is really this sort of AI experimentation phase. And I think the Gartner report really underscores this idea that CMOs are falling into what they call AI competency traps, what I would sort of call sort of endless experimentation. And rather than moving into something that's really going to benefit their businesses, are sort of stuck in this endless cycle of piloting. There are, of course, as you well know, marketing leaders who are really driving adoption and value with AI, but that's not the standard at this point. And so I know you and I have both worked with clients, but also, talked with many folks. What are you hearing? Are you hearing a similar sort of pivot from experimentation to systemization that's being reflected here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Gartner report definitely is super insightful. I think in my observation, I think when there is experimentation happening without a larger strategy in place, right? Where, you have marketing leaders opening it up, and all marketers at this point, 90% plus within a marketing team are already using just AI to some degree, right? Pretty much everybody's using ChatGPT or LLM of their choice, if you will, and more. But what is happening if you open up experimentation sort of loosely, carte blanche, anybody can do whatever, it's awesome. It's a great way to get the team engaged and all that kind of stuff. But really, without an overarching kind of strategic North Star guiding your AI strategy in marketing, we see a lot of these experiments are just kind of endless cycles, right? They're just keeps happening. There's different tools. And sometimes, even though the experiments are successful, you find out that when it's time to scale those, they never get scaled because there's always more value assigned to other things, again, which is not apparent when you were trying to come up with a strategy. So you can come up with AI in pretty much every functional area of marketing, but I think it'd be good for CMOs and marketing leaders to kind of have an overarching strategy and define the use cases, prioritize use cases, which are, perhaps adding the most value or doing it in the best amount of time. That to me is the best combination, most value, least complicated quadrant, if you will. And that makes sure that all your experimentation is kind of meaningful and purposeful, so that it's not just, meaning experimentation, forever.
Yeah, totally agree. And, the talk that I did last week targeted this mindset a little bit. The original title of my talk was going to be Death by a Thousand Cuts, how disconnected AI efforts are slowly bleeding your agency dry. And I think that the two are connected, right? I think the idea of, to your point, sort of endless experimentation or pilots that don't become something greater, this is a theme, right? This is an idea that people are trying, people are experimenting, people are being innovative, and that's wonderful and necessary. But I think it's that next step that people really need to start thinking about. And, as I think about this specific report and some next steps that marketers and CMOs can take away from it, I would say a few things. The first thing that I would say is there's been a noticeable increase in acceleration of the users of AI and drivers of AI and their abilities. And the strength of what they're doing has really accelerated in the last 12 months. But the folks who are laggards are, in my mind, really falling farther behind. And so what I would suggest is that CMOs should run an AI competency audit, right? Really understand how AI is being used, who on your team is capable of using it in a really beneficial way, who is not. And, you talked about sort of value versus effort matrix. I think there's a really important need to say, what business problem are we solving here? And even if it's a small one, let's focus on it until we've really worked out the details. And again, move from experimentation to systemization. So I think, not everybody's going to be, an early leader here, a market shaper, and that's okay. But I think it's time for the market conformers and even the late adopters to start systematizing in a way that's going to help their organizations really and truly start to benefit from AI.
No, absolutely. I think from a Gartner standpoint, was there any data point that sort of surprised you?
We talked about it a moment ago, but I think the fact that people are spending 15% of their budget on this, but only getting, 30% of them saying they can scale, tells me that there is a lot of not necessarily wasted money. I mean, I think there's just value in learning and trying. But I think what we're going to very quickly come to the point of is that number is going to keep going up from a budget perspective. And if it holds steady at only 30% of scaling, I think you're going to start really throwing money out the window. So that's what I would use as sort of the number to take away is, get that 30% scaling number up and really focus on, again, systemization.
Yeah, it's such a fun time to be a CMO and a marketing leader, because this AI revolution is definitely going to change a whole bunch of things. But I constantly hear from CMOs that is a dichotomy. They're excited, but at the same time, they're so overwhelmed. Some of them are like, hey, I use AI every day, but it is so annoying. Like there is new stuff, every day. It's like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Good stuff. Well, hey, you want to move on to story 2? You ready?
Yes, let's go for it.
Time for the Abby Show. There was another important meeting that took place earlier this month. Google I/O took place, and I think you're going to tell us about some of the, what sound to me like very impactful things that they talked about at that conference.
Yeah, so the second story is really about, the search box being retired, right? In the traditional sense of the word, kind of like how you and me have come to know about it for, the last 25 years or so. So at Google I/O, Google announced that their biggest overhaul of search in 25 years, that traditional search box is being replaced by AI-powered interface built on Gemini, right? And this was not hey, this is, coming soon announcement. This is happening. The rollout's already started. And to put the scale of this in context, the AI mode in Google search has, 1 billion with a B monthly users. And AI overviews has 2.5 billion. So this isn't a fringe feature. It is, it's the mainstream experience. So blue links are not disappearing entirely. They're being pushed down further and out of default view. Most users, my take is they're not going to scroll down to them. And then, we're all used to Google Alerts. I know I use Google Alerts, but Google also introduced this concept of information agents, which is very similar to the old-fashioned Google alerts, but AI that runs in the background 24/7, monitors the web, and proactively alerts users when something relevant to them changes or happens. And it's not just to mention, it's understanding what the change is, interpreting it based on, how you prompt it. And so, users don't have to search for things at all. And this is coming in the summer for you subscribers. And then, in addition to that, like just a couple of weeks before the Google I/O conference, Google also published their first official AI optimization guide, which is essentially, think of it as a playbook for how brands will show up in AI search, right? And, the headline, if you will, from that was that AEO and GEO are not separate disciplines. In Google's exact words, optimizing for generative AI search is still SEO. So that kind of puts to rest the, what do we call it, AEO and GEO and or whatever. So, Google's take is, it's still search. We're just using AI for search. So they're still calling it SEO. And then one of the things that was interesting that they explicitly called out and told marketers to stop wasting time on a few things. They didn't say exactly stop wasting time, but they said some of the things like LLMs.txt, which is much like robots.txt on a website, or breaking content into chunks for AI, or generating, fake mentions or citations. Apparently, Google ignores all of that. Now, that said, some of our own experimentation, and in some cases working with agencies, we're not seeing that. So, example, if you're breaking up content into chunks for AI, or adding your LLMs.txt, we have seen an improvement. And remember, it's not just Gemini, it's also Claude and OpenAI and Perplexity and all those things. So even though Google has taken a stance on it, I'm not seeing. I think this needs more clarity on unpacking as this evolves, on the impact and what is the science behind what marketers should be doing on their websites, right? But I have a set of numbers that I made a note of, which I thought was fascinating, right? Which kind of reinforces the importance of this stuff. So AI overviews now appear on almost half of all Google searches, and that's up 34% in just 5 months. So the acceleration is real. 60% of almost all US searches, I should say almost 60% of all US searches now end without a single click, right? So the user who is looking for stuff, they got the answer from the search results. They're not clicking on anything else. They just read the output and they've moved on. And then the click-through rate for the number one organic result has dropped from 27% down to as low as 11% on queries where an AI answer appears above it, meaning that people are relying more and more on AI answers. So these are some of the numbers which have reinforced what you and me have, spoken about in pretty much all the previous 4 episodes of this podcast series, where search and brand discovery in search is changing, pretty dramatically. And from a marketing leader standpoint, this is not a slow transition. There's, a popular belief that, this is going to come in due course and that sort of stuff. That is, certainly not the case. This is live and well and happening now. I think your paradigm for marketing leaders is changing, where it's going from, hey, how do we rank on page 1 of Google, the traditional search, to now, how do we get cited in the AI answer? So is it, share of voice? And these are very different problems that require different solutions, right? And there's numbers again. So brands that are being cited inside AI answers are earning almost 35% more organic clicks than the brands that aren't. So there is real competitive advantage to whoever gets cited, in these AI answers. And I would love to get your take on this as well, but I feel that, as marketers, this is, it's exciting, encouraging, it's changing and all those sort of things, but it's frustrating at the same time where, Google has told us that, hey, what earns AI visibility is the same thing that earned visibility when it came to SEO, good old fashioned SEO, like distinctive content, real expertise, authoritative sources. Technically, it's got to be a crawlable site. So some of those foundations have not changed. So there's no new shortcut, but the brands that are winning at AI search are the ones who've never chased shortcuts to begin with. But I feel that, for a lot of people, they were looking for, oh, wow, something, what do we need to do to start appearing in search? And yes, there's some guidelines in what, Google, published in their playbook, but nothing monumental where you're like, aha, this is a brand new way of doing it. So I'd love to get your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you made a good point a moment ago when you talked about some of these things just haven't changed, right? I think a lot has changed, a lot will continue to change in how marketers need to think and act in this new world. But I think one thing that has not changed is the need for just good content. And, I'm going to talk about this here in my next topic. But I think there is a value in people being able to see good content from other people, right? And we can set aside the agents talking to agents conversation because that's a whole different ball game. But I think what I hear and what I take away from what you just described is that Google is putting a premium on and giving a premium space to things that answer people's questions and make that experience easy and fast and successful. And so if you as a marketer are creating content for your audiences, be thinking about how to make it as easy as possible for them to get the answer they need to the question that they are asking. And in some ways, it's as simple as that, right? There's only so much that, the average marketer or person can do when it comes to gaming these systems or learning some magic trick. The fact of the matter is that it's all changing so quickly that in some ways you have to sort of hold on to those core things that matter in marketing, which is good storytelling, by real people. That in some ways I don't think is going to go away anytime soon.
No, you're right. And I think some of the fundamentals are the same, like you were talking about, like, there's, if I was to simplify and say, hey, what should marketers do? So 3 buckets there's the technical part, there's the content part, and then there's the PR part. So in traditional SEO world, those are backlinks. And here we're talking about similar concept backlinks, but more from a PR angle where you have authoritative sources referencing your brand and your website back. But the technical portion is where you want to make sure your site is indexable and is not blocking things, the LLM crawlers and what have you. And then there's a concept of schemas, that your schemas are on the website and your technical FAQs on the website, which makes it easy for the LLMs to index your website. So some of those technical things remain, and the form factor may be a little bit different, but those are the foundational things. And the second thing is the content portion of it, which is what you were talking about, which I love because, you want to still make sure that the content is helpful, it is authoritative, it is authentic. So making sure that foundational content is still at the core of how these LLMs will judge and pick up, your content. And then finally, like I said, from a PR standpoint, I think the sense of credibility and authoritativeness is how many other people are talking about you, hopefully in a positive light, right? So those are things that are super important, but I think there are so many tools out there. One thing I would recommend that marketing leaders should do is really start with measurement. Measure and see how your brand is showing up on these LLMs. You can't improve what you don't measure, essentially, right? And so there's lots of these tools out there. A lot of them are free, a lot of them are full-on platforms. But for example, HubSpot launched recently a tool called AEO Sensor, where you can find how your brand is appearing on ChatGPT, Gemini, and Perplexity answers right now. I don't think you need a subscription for that. And there's lots of other platforms out there, Gumshoe, Profound, what have you, where people can use these tools and very quickly get a sense of how your brand is doing. Okay, now you know that. Now you can develop your content strategy and your PR strategy around it to make sure that you are showing up. But I think the landscape is just changing so fast that marketers are really kind of struggling. We were already struggling with organic traffic falling dramatically in clickless searches. And this, I think, is just going to make it worse if you look at it from a traditional standpoint, but it is going to make it better for people who are looking for answers, right? Because then, again, Google and all of these LLMs are in the business of surfacing up things that would be most useful to you. There is a paid aspect of it we're going to talk about later in another story, so I won't touch upon that right now. But I think this, the very fact that, the traditional search box that you and me have grown up with in a lot of ways, is that chapter is coming to a close.
Yeah, it's like the telephone hanging on the wall with the cord attached. Those days are gone, and I think we're going to be in the same boat here before long. We're going to look back at images of Google search and think, wow, that really looks out of date.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to our next story, Matt. Yeah. So, we're all used to marketing to human beings, right? And now we got to market to agents, and apparently the tactics are not the same. And again, there's some research done by Harvard Business Review. Tell us what they did, what they found, and what implications does it have for marketing leaders?
Yeah, this was a fascinating study. This was done by HBR, as you said, came out a little earlier in the month. And, you and I have talked about it, and it's sort of out in the ether. This idea of agents talking to agents is something that is certainly very much in the future, but also very much in the present. And so this HBR study looked at the success of marketing activities of agent to agent marketing. What sorts of things were AI agents responding positively to when they were marketed to by other AI agents? We're in bizarro land at this point. But the fact of the matter is, and I think we know this inherently, is that a growing share of online shoppers are now using, are not just using, but they are AI agents themselves. And what you just described with the Google experience is a good example, right? There's research, comparison, purchase, all of that is happening in some cases on behalf of the consumer. And it certainly is something that is often happening without the consumer necessarily even knowing that it's happening really behind the scenes. But what HBR did in their study was test 8 common promotional tactics across 4 AI models and 16,000 simulated shopping rounds. And so what their goal was here was to understand what sorts of things do AI agents respond to from a quote unquote traditional marketing perspective versus what do they not respond to. And what they found, interestingly, was a number of things that the typical sales experience online would include, like scarcity badges, countdown timers, strike-through pricing, bundling. Every one of those things was found to be an unreliable predictor of purchase behavior. And in fact, some of those activities backfired. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but the AI seemed to recognize that this was a tactic that was meant to manipulate. And so the AI agents moved away from those tactics. The one tactic that seemed to work consistently across all of the models, and in some ways, I think this goes back to what you were saying a moment ago related to Google, is star ratings. Star ratings are a proxy for human beings saying, I liked this or I didn't like it. And so the AI agents themselves responded positively to star ratings. And so I think, as we think about the way that our marketing needs to evolve, it's very interesting to consider the ways that we've done this for so long will need to change, because we're not just marketing to human beings. we are marketing to AI agents that really have a different set of criteria in what they're looking for. So it's, to me, it's a fascinating thing that marketers really have to start to understand, which is, we have for decades built marketing strategy, marketing tactics on the idea of human persuasion, right? That persuasion playbook has been in place for a long time. You think about, the show Mad Men, right? That's all about the ways that you can, manipulate human psychology to do something that you want them to do. But those ideas, those core ideas, loss aversion, scarcity, anchoring, agents don't have those biases, right? And so we can't market to those necessarily, certainly not in a total way. And so, it gives marketers, I think, an opportunity probably to have two paths that they need to be considering. One is the human path, one is the AI agent path, and who knows how long this, set of paths will last. But I think for now, you have to really be thinking about marketing to humans and marketing to AI, and what are the different things that we need. What do we need to be considering as we do that? Have you run into this, Abby, in your day-to-day? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking about this because to me, it seems like without the, human psychology in all of those levers that marketers have at their disposal to influence and convince people to make a purchase, what are we left with? It's in quality. The star ratings are a proxy of quality. So it's good old fashioned, is it good or not, and how much does it cost? Yeah. So I think that is interesting, and I thought about two aspects of that. So one was that, hey, does that mean that we're going to see an increased price competition, which is a good thing for consumers, right? Yeah. But then the other thing is, our agents, we know we're using different LLMs, whether if you use ChatGPT or Claude or Grok, for example, they all have different personalities. I'm wondering, in the future, are we going to have a situation where they could be just like human psychology, they could be AI psychology based on copying agents, and maybe I'm sure marketers would experiment with it and come up with ways of doing that. And, it's not like brand positioning is going to go away. You're not going to have a price competition suddenly between Lululemon and Walmart because they're positioned differently, they're different quality and different brackets or different segments of the market. But it's an interesting concept on how you and me as consumers would just send our agents, quote unquote, to go shopping. And then, hopefully we get we as the consumers are the beneficiaries of this. But from the marketing side of it, you obviously, like you said, you need a completely different strategy for human beings and a different one for agents. And it would be really fascinating to see the impact of this on pricing and inventory and research and positioning and ranking of brands and that sort of thing. And I think it may change the landscape of how people consume stuff.
Yeah, and I think your idea of sort of, different marketing approaches for different LLMs is interesting. I can imagine, the ChatGPT ad model being one where you have to use very sycophantic language and tell it how great it is and how smart it is, and it's never had a better idea than that. So that's the ChatGPT model. The Grok model will be, swearing and, off-color jokes, and you're going to have to understand the psychology of your particular LLM. So we have a brave new world ahead of us here, Abby. I don't know. But the thing that I sort of take away from this, as always when we do this, is like, okay, so what does this mean for a CMO, right? How do I keep up? How do I make a good decision here in this ever-changing landscape? One of the first things that you can do is certainly audit your advertising, and look at it through the lens of persuasion. Are we doing things here that are purposefully trying to be persuasive? Are we, as it said, using strike-through numbers or countdown timers, things that are really meant to manufacture agency or put pressure on the buyer to do something? If you're doing that, I think you need to, I would say just generally probably worth reconsidering that approach in general. But if that's a part of your mix, I think it's worth definitively ensuring that when you're marketing to humans, you're using that set of activities. But when you're marketing to agents, that you should not be doing that, because they're going to, in fact, put you in a worse position, vis-a-vis your customers, your competition, if you're using those, scare tactics or push tactics. So audit what you're doing and make sure that you're being really clear and thoughtful about the approaches that you're taking. The fundamentals are, needing to, be airtight. I think we're coming back a lot here today to fundamentals being in a good place. But, you talked about the pricing side of things, the brand side of things. I think pricing and real human reviews are the things that these LLMs put above all else. And so be really clear and focused on, your pricing is pricing for value, and, you understand your competitive environment and where your pricing should be to be as valuable as you can be. But then those reviews, don't just ask an AI agent to spin up 1,000 fake reviews with the goal of trying and game the system. It's not going to work. And then the last thing I would say is starting a testing practice, right? AI model behavior, as we know, is changing all the time, every day. But you have to understand what's happening. So you have to run tests on, the different models that are out there, what's working for them, what's not. And this can't be something that you try once and don't come back to again for 6 months or a year. It's something that has to be a regular part of your marketing operation so that you are being as effective as you can for your human audience and for your AI agent audience.
Amazing. Yeah, I wonder how long before, Matt, you and me send our agents to record this podcast. That would be fun.
Won't be long. I think we should get some avatars. It'll be hard to make them as handsome and charming as us. But maybe there's a model that can handle it, Abby. I don't know.
Let's do it, man. I definitely got to make mine skinnier for sure.
And mine has got to come down to my 5 head a little bit.
Awesome. Speaking of shopping behavior, one of the things in our last story for this episode is really about advertising, online advertising, and that space is seeing some pretty monumental changes, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about Google and OpenAI and Meta today. But honestly, there is so much news in that area. I'm going to author a blog standalone just in this topic because there is so much to cover, especially if you add, Shopify and Amazon and, all these different providers or the paid media space, right? But I think focusing on, let's talk about Google first. They've been busy. They have a lot of things happening. So one of the first things is they announced that the dynamic search ads, which is one of the most widely used campaign types across the industry, are being retired, right? They're being replaced by something which they're calling AI Max. So AI Max is a campaign level setting where Google's AI takes over the work that traditional media teams had to do manually. It'll handle keyword matching, writes ad copy and descriptions or ad headlines and descriptions, I should say. It'll adjust which landing page to send people to based on their intent. The human sets the goal and the AI figures out how to get there, right? Again, not a future plan. This is happening, and I think the migration of existing campaigns starts, I believe, in September, this year. So if you are a brand doing this yourself, or you're an agency, handling this for your clients, something for you to pay attention to. And on the heels of your involvement, in the world of agencies and AI, I would like to get your take, maybe towards the end of this story, where I think this is going to change the landscape for agencies that are doing paid media. So I think there's lots of implications there. Yeah, and then I think the second part is this is part of a pattern that Google has been pretty much executing, over the last 6 to 8 months, right? They already retired standards, text ads, form ads, responsive image ads earlier this year. So manual ad formats are being removed one by one. That's the pattern that I'm seeing, right? And then on top of that, Google announced brand new ad placements that only exist inside AI mode that we were talking about, right? So sponsored responses that appear while users are asking follow-up questions, and direct offers that surface when purchase intent is detected, in an AI conversation. So these are new quote unquote surfaces that did not exist, a year ago. So, overall, I'm seeing that the friction in the world of Google Ads, which has been Google's bread and butter, is changing to where from idea of who you want to target, what's your message, what do you want to sell, to execution, that friction and that distance is shrinking, right? Where you can now just have AI do stuff, right? And that's just Google. OpenAI earlier in the month of May officially announced a self-serve ad manager, which people can go to. If you go to like ads.openai.com, you can get to the ad manager. And for the first time, any brand can buy ads directly inside ChatGPT, right? Cost per click, no minimum spend, no agency required. So you could go in and play around with it. And, there are lots of existing agencies, WPP, Publicis, Omnicom, Dentsu, are already integrated into the ecosystem as part of all the testing and experimentation that OpenAI had. But now, the average person can just go in, spin up an ad manager and start inserting your ads in OpenAI conversations. And the same thing, as we know, the previous story, like I mentioned, Google is doing the same thing. So that's, two out of the big four. I wonder how long. I know Claude's made a stand in no paid media, Perplexity, not sure, they flip-flopped a little bit, but that's OpenAI. And then let's talk about Meta, right? So for Meta's launched what they're calling AI connectors, which is in beta mode right now, and advertisers can now manage Meta campaigns, audiences, creative, and all those things, and reporting directly through AI tools like Claude and ChatGPT using Meta's own MCP server, right? So you don't need complicated API, developer credentials coding needed. You can start running some of these things, leveraging MCP through the standard tools that we've all come to use and love. So again, you see an example of how all of these platforms are leveraging AI where almost manual ad management is being phased out. And, certainly I have a perspective on what marketing leaders, why should they care, and, what should they do about it. But I want to pause and get your take on what this means for agencies from your perspective, because obviously a lot of agencies are, paid media is their bread and butter. And I see this as a huge impact where brands may, are they going to not use agencies anymore because the mechanics of that are all being handled by AI? Or how do you see this play out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we work with a lot of agencies that are wrestling with this right now. In fact, you and I did a project last year with a large organization buying, lots and lots of media. And we were introduced to an AI platform that does the buying and the bidding and the optimization entirely on its own. And I distinctly remember meeting with the CEO and asking him, what does your most successful client look like? If you were to describe the agency that is going to be the most successful with your platform, what does that look like? And what he said was, turn the AI on and leave it alone. And to your point a moment ago, there's work that has to happen in the beginning by the humans to set strategy and budget parameters and brand goals and all of that kind of stuff. But the CEO's point was that the AI is going to be better and more effective at doing all the mechanics of buying and selling and optimizing and finding new markets than a human being will. And so I think agencies, in my mind, really need to start thinking about what they're doing here differently. And it's not about the mechanics of buying and optimizing and all of that. It really is about how do you add value in a way that your client can't get from AI, can't get from another agency, right? You mentioned again when you were talking about OpenAI a moment ago, you used a phrase, no agency required. A lot of this stuff is self-serve now. A lot of the stuff does not require an agency to do it. The ad creative can be done by AI, the placement can be done by AI, the optimization, reporting. So it has to really make the agency owner come back and say, okay, well, what does that leave for us? And to me, it is that uniquely human set of behaviors and capabilities around relationship building and creativity and strategy and understanding of markets and context that I think a lot of agencies have gotten so focused on the mechanics of things and the doing of things that they've lost sight of those more important things. And so to answer your question directly, I think the impact on agencies here is that they need to be focused on those things that really they can do uniquely and can do better than the AI, because there's an awful lot of stuff here that AI is just fundamentally going to be better at. And why not let them do what they're best at and leave the humans to do the things that the agents cannot do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And on similar fashion on the brand side, the what is happening, I feel that with all of these platform changes, things that paid media teams used to do, right? Keyword lists, bid management, writing ad copy, variation, structuring campaigns. These are all getting automated at the platform level, right? So that's one. So, if you're a marketing leader, you should definitely care about that same thing, to your point, agency leaders, right? And then the quote unquote surface of where all this is going to happen is also changing at the same time, right? Where it's not going to be the traditional search. It's now, AI mode or, LLM search, where this is all going to start showing up. So those are two sort of tectonic plate changes. And I don't see the marketer's role going away. If you are a marketer where your ad spend volume may not be massive, in that case, it could be you could just bring some of these things in house, which is the chatter I am hearing already. For brands which have massive budgets and really need resources, it's not just the tech. You can just take all these things blindly and pull it back in house from an agencies. But certainly, the exact mechanics of the role of the agency and how much they're paying the agency, all those things will come into play. But from a marketer's standpoint, I still feel that the marketer's role is not going away. I think what is going to change is how you end up briefing AI. So again, in a lot of ways, your skills to write the brief is the output, prompting, right? So giving it better direction, cleaner data, sharper audience definitions, better business goals, and so on and so forth, creative guidelines, templates, what have you. Giving all AI all of those things so AI can produce better output. And there's got to be a good bit of experimentation. So at the end of the day, I feel like it's garbage in, garbage out. And if you're putting in garbage in, well, great. AI is going to deploy that garbage, right? So I think that's where I think humans are going to be needed. Human marketers are going to be needed, because those are things that are uniquely human, where we can provide, as marketers, we should provide the right, sharper, pointed direction to AI. And I think there may be a positive outcome where your ad dollars may go longer, right? Like you may get more value out of it, because now it's no longer, hey, I put in all this stuff, I'm running ads, and because there's an overhead in day-to-day bid management and management of those ads, which, a lot of in-house marketers don't really have the bandwidth of doing. AI can handle that for you. But I think you'll get a very good sense of if AI will, quote unquote, deploy garbage based on the inputs, if your input is garbage. So something to keep in mind. And, from a marketing standpoint, make sure that there's kind of two two key things that I would recommend marketing leaders, paid media leaders to consider. So one is get in, educate yourself, test it, get your hands dirty, and come up with a strategy. Here's our traditional paid media campaigns. This is what it looks like. What does this mean? What is our migration strategy? How are you going to do it? Look at deadlines provided by Google and all these different platforms and see what ad categories are getting phased out and what's getting moved over and those sort of things. And then the second part of it is you have to have an honest conversation about paid media teams and what is the implications of jobs. I know a lot of paid media people who are freaking out and like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be, out of a job. And really that needs to be a decision, within that leadership that, what is the highest value that those paid media folks who have a lot of experience, what's the value that they can now bring in, which is the human value, which is, unbelievable. That has to be matched up with data quality and creative thinking and audience insights and business context and all of these things, which some of those people can bring in. So I would highly encourage you guys to have that conversation, to our listeners, have that conversation internally as to, what does this mean? If you have paid media people, what are they currently doing? Where can they add value? And if you think that there's things that AI can truly do, pause and see how you can repurpose those roles to recast those roles within the team to add value, as opposed to just hitting the easy button and saying, hey, we're going to kind of lay people off and that sort of thing, which I'm seeing a lot of brands do. And then sometimes they'll kind of regret it that they pull the trigger too fast. So my advice would be to have those conversations in a more measured and strategic way. And a lot of this is very new. So, wait for, let it marinate, see what's happening and get a full picture before you are fast on the draw, so to speak.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, lots of good ideas and advice in there for sure. Good stuff.
Awesome, Matt. That brings us to an end. Wow, I think this was a good call to have fewer stories. I felt good about the airtime we gave each one of them. What do you think?
Yeah, good stuff. Definitely. Yeah. And we got some good Casa Bonita talk in. So I know it's been a good hour.
Awesome. I want to go to Denver just to get some Casa Bonita action now.
Oh yeah. No, you have to make the pilgrimage, my friend. Next time you're there, you gotta book early because those reservations fill up very early. So make sure you plan ahead.
Awesome. I'm going to try to cash in on the Matt Sear frequent flyer miles at Casa Bonita. And I will extend that offer to all our listeners as well who are heading to Denver or live in Denver. But Matt, thank you very much. Enjoyed the episode. Looking forward to next time.
Sounds great. Thanks, Abby. Good to see you.
Yep. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. You can follow the podcast in all the channels that you get your podcast from. You can follow Matt and me on LinkedIn. See you in June. Till then, have a good one.
Thanks for listening. Big thanks to Spark Novus and the Marketing AI Pulse community. You can join the community at marketingaipulse.com.